And because we all have confirmation bias, we want to make it the rule. My entire life with polling for presidents, polling was pretty accurate within 3 or 4%. Polling's always been accurate. Then in 2016, it wasn't with Trump, the silent Trump voters. But now conservatives tend to think, well, polling's no longer accurate. Well, my whole life it was accurate. Why, because of 2016, would it suddenly, you can't trust any polling? We do polling at Fox all the time. It always ends up being accurate. Companies all over the country do polling constantly. It's accurate. But because in 2016 it wasn't accurate, everybody now, conservatives are like, well, you can't trust polling. At Fox, I use it in some of my personal businesses. I use it at Fox. I use it at Premier Radio. Polling's always worked. We can't take an outlier and say, this is the new rule. That's the basis of where I come from. It's not a political rant, it's football. So 2 things have been true in my life for quarterbacks. First of all, don't listen to anybody. Size matters. Of the 30 best quarterbacks of all time, 28 are big men, over 6'2.5". I'm 6'2". I am taller than almost everybody I walk around at Fox. That's big. The average great quarterback is like 6'2.5" up. Peyton, Tom, Ben, Aikman. You ever stood next to Troy Aikman? Big chest, big hands, big shoulders, big head. He's a big guy. So that's a fact. But because Russell Wilson dances around, we're like, well, look at that, it's the future. No, it's not the future. He's unbelievable. And because Kyler Murray is also unbelievable, and Fran Tarkenton was unbelievable. You don't remember him. I do, because I'm older. He played at Georgia, then the Vikings. He was the first runaround small quarterback. 3 small quarterbacks, you could argue Michael Vick, not at that level, but close, have worked. And they're all runaround guys. You can't catch Kyler. You couldn't. Fran Tarkenton ran circles around people for 10 years. I watched. I was just a kid. I didn't have facial hair then. And then Russell does it, and Kyler does it, and Michael Vick did it. Tua is small and isn't really that athletic. So he has to be like 2016 polling. He has to be a historic exception. Can he be Drew Brees? Good God, that's asking a lot. Drew Brees is the outlier in the history of football. Small, doesn't have a huge arm, doesn't run around, and wins. That's the only prototype I get to use? That's it? I can't take 2016 polling and say, that is the new rule. Polling never is accurate. Of course it's accurate. Trump was a unique businessman that ran for president. He was out there, a lot of bragging, and people didn't want to admit they liked him, but I can't say that's polling. Companies, there's a lot of polling beyond political polling that's used every day by Amazon and Microsoft. They're doing polling constantly. What product will you like? What product won't you like? It's all pretty accurate. This idea that size doesn't matter is nonsense. It doesn't. Go look at the 40 best quarterbacks. They're almost all big. And when you do get the like 5'11 and a half guy, Fran Tarkenton and Russell Wilson, yeah, you can't catch them. They're like comets. You know, nobody can catch Russell Wilson. And then Kyler Murray, you look out and you're like, oh, that's going to work in the NFL. Come on, you can't even. Kyler Murray does. He's like a marble on a wood floor. A cat couldn't catch him. Tua's got all the small, but none of the wiggle. So he's going to struggle to see over offensive lines. And unlike a Kyler Murray or a Fran Tarkenton or a Russell Wilson, who move around a lot and therefore open up passing lanes they can see, Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray, they throw interceptions, and we all acknowledge, analysts acknowledge, they couldn't see over the offensive lineman. So I get the small without the wiggle. Show me the success stories. 1, Drew Brees. I'm not, and I told you, you were here. I do think his comp, leadership A+, toughness A+, smarts A+, big game productivity A+. But I had this epiphany. I'm like, what am I? I'm watching all these comments on polling, and I'm like, suddenly polling's never accurate? That's silly. That's not true. Polling's accurate all the time. 90% of the time it's accurate. And this idea that short and no wiggle is going to dominate in the NFL, I'm like, who are the 2 quarterbacks? Let me ask you this. So think about Burrow and Justin Herbert. they're both way better than we thought, right? Like Burrow is good, and most of you thought was good, but Burrow and Herbert's big with a big arm. And we're all like, I can't believe he's good. We were stupid. He's a 4-point student with a rocket arm who's big and runs around. So he's got the arm Tua doesn't. He's got the size Tua doesn't. And he's got the wiggle Tua doesn't. That's why he's successful, because he can buy time. He runs around. He's got a huge arm. You can hit him. He's got huge size, no injury history. He's got all the things that Tua doesn't. And it's working big time in the NFL. Joe Burrow doesn't have a huge arm, but he's got all sorts of wiggle. He's got all sorts of wiggle. And he's got size. Tua doesn't have any of that. See, sometimes it would be perfect, right? If you were creating companies, if you're Jeff Bezos, if you're Mark Cuban, all these guys have had epiphanies, but they never come when you want them to. That's why you get all the information you can get before a draft. You hope you get the epiphany before the draft. But sometimes, and I've talked to Bill Polian and Hall of Fame GMs, they're like, I had an epiphany. It was in camp. I'm like, oh, of course it didn't work. Of course he doesn't work. Just like all these great business leaders. Bill Gates has had failures. Steve Jobs had failures. Jeff Bezos. Not all their businesses work because they get the epiphany after the deadline. And the deadline's the draft in the NFL. That's the deadline, the draft. You gotta have your epiphany before the draft. And I'm driving this morning and I'm like, wait a minute. This could be terrible. This could not work at all. This is why you have to play Tua now. You have to find out. You have to find out. Put him out there, 8 games, let's watch. And I hope I'm wrong. And maybe I am wrong. But I'm sitting there this morning thinking, oy, did I whiff on this? I had my epiphany. It's too late. I already bragged about him for 6 months. Joy of the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
I think spooky season got to you.
My pool broke down at 3 in the morning. In my bed, and I thought, why is the garbage truck here? And I opened the door, and I'm like, there's no garbage truck. I went downstairs, thought my dogs were howling, and my dogs were howling at the pool, which the engine broke, and it was screaming through the neighborhood at 3:30 in the morning. And you have no idea what it's like to have a wrench and a hammer at 3:30 in the morning, groggy, in the dark, trying to fix a pool so your neighbors don't want to come over there and pelt you. I've been on a phone all morning with a pool guy.
Antonio Brown can't practice with the Bucs until next week, but he was in the facility for the first time yesterday. And Bruce Arians was very pleased with what he saw.
Yeah, he looks fantastic. I think we had really good conversations today, he and I, and he was with the meeting. He was in the meetings and everything, and he's working with Anthony Proli and the strength staff. He looks in great shape, and ready to go.
I never questioned whether Antonio Brown would be in shape.
That is never the question. He was a legendary worker in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, he's always been an incredibly hard worker when it comes to football and staying in shape. That was never an issue with him. His last game was September 15th of 2019, so over a year ago, slightly over a year ago with the Patriots. He caught 4 passes, 56 yards and a touchdown. That was his only game last season. His last full season with the Steelers was 2018. He had 104 receptions, over 1,200 yards, 15 touchdowns in 15 games. So that's...
I don't doubt his talent at all. It's all the other stuff. It's the opposite of Dak. With Dak, I never loved the arm, but I love all the intangibles.